The narrative around eastern Ukraine has shifted again, and NATO knows it. What we're witnessing right now isn't a sudden collapse or a dramatic breakthrough. It's something far more dangerous: momentum. Momentum is the one factor modern military planners fear the most, because once it builds, it becomes extremely difficult to stop. Over the past weeks, Russian operations across eastern Ukraine have entered a new phase, not defined by spectacular headlines, but by steady, synchronized pressure that is forcing NATO analysts to reassess their assumptions about the battlefield. For months, the front lines appeared relatively static: attritional fighting, incremental advances, limited operational depth. That era is fading. What has replaced it is a pattern NATO planners recognize all too well from historical campaigns: sustained pressure applied simultaneously across logistics, air defense, manpower, and decision-making cycles. And this is why NATO is watching so closely. This new momentum is not about territory alone, it's about tempo. Russia is now setting the pace of operations, forcing Ukrainian defenses into a reactive posture. When one sector comes under pressure, reinforcements are shifted. As soon as that happens, another sector ignites. This constant movement exhausts reserves, strains logistics, and fragments command cohesion. NATO intelligence assessments describe this as operational stretching. Defenses are not necessarily collapsing, but they are being pulled thinner every week. The problem is not one single weak point. The problem is too many pressure points at once. What's changed is how Russian forces are applying pressure. Instead of large, easily detectable offensives, operations are being conducted through overlapping micro-advances supported by precision fire, drones, and persistent reconnaissance. Every movement is observed. Every response is measured. The battlefield has become transparent in ways that were not possible earlier in the war. Drones are central to this shift. Persistent aerial surveillance allows Russian units to identify rotation patterns, supply movements, and defensive preparations in near real time. Once a vulnerability appears, it is exploited quickly, not with overwhelming force, but with precision. This matters because precision warfare changes the cost equation. It forces defenders to spend more resources for diminishing returns. Air defense missiles, artillery shells, and trained personnel are consumed faster than they can be replaced. NATO planners are deeply concerned about this dynamic because it mirrors a broader structural problem facing Western militaries: industrial depth. Russia's ability to sustain pressure is tied directly to its industrial output. Ammunition production, drone manufacturing, glide dom kits, and armored vehicle refurbishment are all operating at wartime tempo. This allows Russia to maintain daily operational pressure without exhausting its strategic reserves. From NATO's perspective, this raises an uncomfortable question. Can Ukraine sustain defensive operations at the same tempo without equivalent industrial backing? So far, the answer appears increasingly uncertain. Logistics have become a defining vulnerability. Supply routes deeper inside Ukraine are now under consistent threat. Long-range strikes are not designed to destroy everything. They are designed to disrupt rhythm. Fuel depots, repair facilities, command nodes, and transportation hubs are being targeted selectively, creating cascading delays that compound over time. This is where momentum becomes decisive. When supplies arrive late, units hold longer than planned. When rotations are delayed, fatigue increases. When fatigue increases, mistakes follow. NATO analysts are watching this cycle unfold and recognize how quickly it can spiral beyond recovery if not stabilized. Another factor driving concern is airspace control.
This is not traditional air superiority in the Western sense. Russian aircraft are not roaming freely over Ukraine. Instead, standoff weapons, glide bombs, and missile strikes are being used to shape the battlefield without exposing aircraft to unnecessary risk. This limits Ukraine's ability to mass forces or fortify positions without being detected and targeted. The psychological effect of this is significant. Units operating under constant observation experience increased stress and reduced initiative. Defensive planning becomes conservative, movement slows, flexibility decreases. Over time, this degrades combat effectiveness, even if casualties remain relatively stable. NATO is particularly focused on how this momentum affects strategic depth. Eastern Ukraine has long been viewed as a buffer zone, where defensive lines could absorb pressure before deeper infrastructure came into play. That assumption is now being questioned. When momentum accelerates, buffers shrink. Supply hubs that were once considered relatively safe now fall within effective strike range. Command centers must relocate more frequently. Air defense systems are spread thinner, protecting critical assets at the expense of frontline coverage. This redistribution weakens the overall defensive posture. None of this suggests an immediate or total collapse. NATO assessments are more cautious than headlines. What they see is a gradual erosion of defensive elasticity. The ability to absorb shocks, reposition forces, and recover from losses is being tested continuously. And that is exactly how momentum works. It doesn't break defenses overnight. It grinds them down until choices become limited. Reinforce here or reinforce there. Protect this asset or that one. Eventually, something gives. This is why NATO is reassessing its planning models. Earlier assumptions relied on predictable cycles of escalation and de-escalation. What's emerging now is a sustained operational rhythm that doesn't pause long enough for recovery. This forces difficult decisions about aid prioritization, production scaling, and long-term strategic commitments. For NATO, the concern is not just about Ukraine, it's about precedent. If sustained momentum backed by industrial capacity proves decisive, it challenges Western military doctrine that emphasizes technological superiority over production volume. Advanced systems are effective, but they are also expensive and slow to replace. Momentum favors systems that can be produced, deployed, and replaced at scale. That lesson is being studied very carefully. Eastern Ukraine has become more than a battlefield. It's a live laboratory for modern warfare under industrial constraints. Every week of sustained pressure provides new data points. Every operational shift reveals strengths and weaknesses in real time. NATO is watching because what happens here will influence defense planning far beyond this conflict. Force structure decisions, procurement priorities, and long-term strategic commitments are all being shaped by these observations. Momentum is not destiny. It can be slowed, redirected, or broken, but doing so requires resources, coordination, and time. And time is the one variable momentum works hardest to eliminate. The situation in eastern Ukraine remains fluid. No outcome is predetermined, but one thing is clear: the pace of operations has changed, and NATO is recalibrating its understanding of the battlefield. If you want calm, fact-based analysis of how modern warfare is actually evolving, not just headlines, make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. This is where we break down the forces shaping global security, one shift at a time.